The cool thing about Josh is that he is a software product manager, which I used to be when I was in the corporate world. So that's awesome. And I know it's a tricky job, and it is a very challenging role full of matrix management and trying to get everybody on the same path of where you want it to be. But more than that, you came from a background of crime, and you did 5 years in prison and took that and made that leap to now working for software development. And that's huge. I have an interview coming up in a couple of weeks with a company that actually helps to combat recidivism. But going from 5 years in prison to this is just amazing. And I would love for you to give us a little bit of background about your story and then help us understand how you made that jump, because that's superhero stuff. I mean,
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's really been a blessing. Sometimes, I kind of can't believe I went through some of the things I went through in comparison to where I am now because I'm so far removed from it. But yeah, I mean, a little bit of background on myself is I grew up in a single parent home with my mother and my sister. I didn't really have a male figure in my life growing up, so I kind of started to look for that outside of the house over time. And I was a nerd in school. I loved learning. I was a studious kid, a good kid, and I didn't have, anything outside of a normal childhood by my own means. And so when I became a teenager, over time you start getting into some mischief and things like that with friends. And around the age of 15 or 16, we broke some windows at like our rival high school. They had this greenhouse that they had some like plant program they were growing plants in, and it was late at night. We passed by, the football rivalry that high schools often have with each other. And so we got caught for doing that. It turned out we were on camera. We
oh,
all got,
and
they called us. They gave us a fine. We all had to go down to the station. It wasn't a major deal, but a big deal for my mother and myself because I've never had any interaction with police or anything to that effect. So it was my first time owing the government money in that sense. They fined me about $700.
whew,
And I was curious, like, how am I going to pay this? I'm a young kid, I'm not working. And I knew some kids at school who were dealing drugs. And I saw, these guys had respect, they had money, people were afraid of them. And so I thought, maybe I can just do this for a short time. But it ended up spiraling into the next 6 years of me, selling drugs.
wow. So it makes sense. I mean, that's a really easy transition to make of, $700 to a kid is a lot. That's what, seven pairs of J's, or,
Yeah,
anything
yeah,
that
yeah,
you want.
right.
Like that's some serious money. And I could see the appeal of, easy money and respect and community. And I could totally see how that transition wouldn't be a hard one to make.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I just wanted to do it to pay the fine, but I made the money so fast
Hmm.
because you know a lot of people in high school at the time. Everyone's smoking. I wasn't like me and my crew of friends. We didn't drink, we didn't smoke. We were, what we called straight edge at the time. We were just, into alternative sports like skateboarding, riding bikes, and we weren't a group of partiers. So I made the money and I was afraid to pay it all off at once, obviously, because I didn't want my mom to know where I came up with it. So I started making some small payments. And then slowly but surely, I started thinking, well, I could do this one more time to get clothes. I could do this one more time to get some sneakers. And then I just ended up getting pretty buried into it after the first year.
I mean, you think about it, it's like any career path. I I know, yeah, it was hard for me to step away from the corporate world and do my own thing, because it's one of those things where you get every single step in. It's not a big jump all the way in. It's like it kind of snowballs over time. And,
Yeah.
and before you know it, you've been in, you said you sold for 6 years?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the beginning, it was just a couple $1,000s and things like that. And I think maybe well, I would say within the first year, I decided to leave my home and move in with some friends because my relationship began to become a bit constrained with my mom. You know, I was falling into that street mentality. We weren't really getting along. And so after I turned 16, I had like $8,000 or so in a shoebox, and I just took it from under my bed and I left, and I moved to an area that had higher drug activity, more like a bad part of my hometown in Bethlehem, of what we classify as a bad area, and began just selling drugs there. And that turned into, 25, $50,000 and amounts of that. So I started, getting into more trouble because with more money, you start getting some more eyes on you. People have problems. They might try to rob you. I was actually shot at when I was 16 by a grown man in his 30s, and I would have thought that that would have deterred me, but instead it kind of just made me realize I need to continue doing this, but I also need to start carrying a gun.
That is such an interesting connection to make, as opposed to like, this is too dangerous. I'm gonna step away. Like, yeah, no, we're gonna double down on this.
So hard-headed, yeah, it's unbelievable.
I mean, that's the thing. It's at that age, you have no comprehension that that you're weak or that you're fallible or that things can happen. Like, that things happen, but you never believe that things can happen to you. And
Right.
it's easy to get in over your head on stuff because I've had those situations where afterwards I'm like, that was really stupid.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We never really think about it at the time, more
Well,
so in retrospect, and it's
no.
usually embarrassing.
I one of my favorite like stupid choices is that in high school my friends and I would go pick up hitchhikers or hobos to go do beer runs for us
Hmm.
because that was a legit choice. It's
Right.
so like we would find a hitchhiker and you'd be like, okay, I'll take you wherever it is you want to go as long as you stop and do a beer run for us first.
And to
And
think about what that would do today, like a choice like that,
right, and
it's insane.
at the time, I was like, this is brilliant. I don't know why more people don't do this. This is the smartest thing I could ever come. You know what I mean? And I would always make my big thing was like, we would never do it alone. I knew better than to do it on my own. But like, what would three teenagers do if the hitchhiker happened to have a gun? Like,
Oh
it
my
was so
gosh, yeah, it would be
stupid.
terrible.
Yes, yes. I think that like it's part of that rite of passage to make really stupid mistakes.
I think so, yeah.
But like,
Some of us
unfortunately,
more than others.
I mean, it just, but it's tough because it sounds like you were Icarus. You were flying so high up against the sun, and then it sounds like it burned you like especially good.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
What was
very
that
much so.
like getting arrested? I can't even wrap my head around it.
Yeah, I mean, to lead into that crime, honestly, it actually didn't have to do with any of my drug dealing or drug activity. I had, my sister was in a long-term relationship with a guy, and she had got pregnant. They got a place together, and we loved this guy. He was part of our family. They were high school sweethearts. And this was around the time I was 18, so I had graduated high school and I had started to come to that realization that I need to get out of this game or try because, it's that logic is starting to kick in as I'm becoming more of an adult. So my biological father lived in California and I have a brother out there as well. So I reconnected with them and they told me, look, uh, come over to California, get away from all that, give this a try. And I said, okay, I'm just going to move. So I went over there. While I was over there in the beginning, everything was good, but my habits, me being a young kid, I wasn't old enough to go out at the time. So it's like I just was home, or, I end up trying to go to this art school and I end up getting kicked out of there. Just the habits came with me and I started selling drugs there as well. And also getting into trouble, getting into fights and whatnot. Meanwhile, my sister and her boyfriend, their relationship became constrained. They separated right before the birth of my nephew, and I was really upset about, you know, that. And he and I began to, you know, have a damaged relationship. So I ended up missing home. I was in California for a year or so, 13 months, and I got homesick. So I moved back home and ended up getting into a confrontation with this guy, and it just escalated really quick, out of control. And it resulted in me, shooting him. And I shot him in the arm and the leg, and I escaped the scene. I mean, I didn't know where he was hit at the time. This was dark. It was on Christmas Eve as well. It wasn't a planned thing that we were going to run into each other. But that turned into me being a fugitive for the next 13 months. I was on the run for an attempted murder, and that was another big point in my life where I knew like things were definitely turning for the worse.
Yeah. And I mean, I would imagine that would be so scary, to know that you're wanted and to know that you've always got that on your back of never knowing like if you're going to get pulled over or, snatched somewhere. That sounds awful.
Right. Yeah, and it was a terrible time in my life. I was, completely paranoid.
Yeah.
There was rumors of people retaliating against me from what I did. I was afraid to leave the city for some time because I was just afraid I was hiding out in a friend's home, had no communication with anyone for months, I was wearing a bulletproof vest if I went anywhere, and was taking a police scanner with me. So if I heard my name over some dispatch call, if someone, saw me, and I ended up making my way back out to the West Coast over time. I got some fake IDs and stuff in Philadelphia, and I started to book bus tickets under different names because I couldn't fly,
Yeah.
uh, because I was wanted. So yeah, I ended up, you know, living on the lam pretty much for that for 13 months as well. And the day finally came when I ended up getting caught, and in a way it was a relief. But I knew I had a whole other journey to face, worrying about how much time I was going to get in prison. Yeah.
Like I can imagine the double-sided component of it. On one hand, like, okay, I always feel it's easier to face the known what's the word I'm looking for? The known commodity. You know what I mean? Like I would rather face something head on and deal with it in the moment than have it on my back because like the longer you put it off, the bigger it gets.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
so to
Yeah,
have it finally done probably was a relief. But on the other hand, there's the new unknown of the court system.
right. Because my original plan was to try and make as much money as I could to try and have something for when I came home. But I talked to a lawyer, and he told me if I took this case to trial, for example, and I was found guilty, that carried a 20 to 40-year sentence.
Oh
So
wow.
I heard those numbers, not understanding the law or understanding that there would be a plea opportunity. I just hung up the phone and thought I have to run, and I have to run as long as I can because
Yeah.
that's the rest of my life in my book.
Yeah. Get as much living in as you can because that is a whole life.
Yeah, yeah, it was a crazy time. Thank God I'm still here to tell the story.
Isn't that I mean, I feel like that's the case with so many of us. Where like you look back and you're like, that was a whole other person. And I mean, it was wild and it was crazy, but that was a whole other person that did that stuff and lived through that stuff.
Yeah, and it makes you realize that, over time we become so many different people.
Yes.
Maybe not so much of a stark difference for the majority of people. They make some very good lifestyle and general changes, some good mindset changes. For myself, I really feel like I went from deep on one side of the spectrum all the way to the other, to the point that it's really hard for me to even recognize that person or think that I was once that person. But I do understand, and I do feel that it took me to go that route to be the version of myself that I am today.
Well, and it is, whenever I talk with it took me a long time to be open with people about the abuse that I experienced growing up and the neglect. And part of it was anytime I would share any of it with people, I could watch them get like stiff and their eyes would get big and it would shift how they would think of me. And it was a part of the story of who I am today, or whoever I was at that moment. It was part of my story, but it also, on one hand, I felt like it colored who they saw me to be, but it also was a critical component of becoming who I am and building that resilience. And like your story, if you hadn't gone through those experiences, I'm sure that you actually learned a lot from selling drugs. That's a true entrepreneur right there. Like that's network marketing at its finest.
Yeah, yeah,
The math skills and the managing so many different components moving and flowing all at once, like that is a true skill set that you developed that I would imagine probably led to some of your success now.
yeah. I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think a lot of the things that we go through and the lessons that we get do prepare us to, just apply those principles in another like quote unquote industry.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I mean, it's
yeah,
my grandfather used to love to say whenever I would screw up, and I screwed up a lot. I am a huge believer in learning through accident and learning through your mistakes. And whenever I would screw up, he would say, "There's a lesson there somewhere. Don't lose it." And it was a good at the time. I hated it, and I was like, you know what?
powerful. Yeah,
Uh,
right.
just let me just exit gracefully. But the point he was making is that every mistake that you make, there is a lesson to be learned from it. And if you stop and take the time to learn the lesson and grow from it, as opposed to hiding from that lesson, then it's a really valuable part in the process of becoming successful. And
Yeah,
and it is, it's like I have to remind myself that sometimes because we all hate to screw up. Like I don't think anyone loves to make a mistake, but mistakes are as valuable as successes are.
yeah, absolutely part of the process. I mean, that was a big proponent of what I went through when I did go to prison, being able to start with, being accountable for the things that I was doing. And then once I was able to get over that mountain of accountability, I was able to start utilizing my time in the right way, exercising, educating myself, trying to, build better relationships with my family, with my friends who were, still supporting me, even though I did everything that I did. That, people were writing me, my friends, my close friends, the same childhood friends that I broke the windows with were, coming to visit me. And I began to understand the ripple effect of what kind of like the effects on a decision I make, how much it affects other people. And I think before I was very closed-minded and tunnel visioned into it was a decision I was just making for myself. And when I used to see my family leaving on the visits and see the way they looked, and even in the other people who had children, I'm not a father, but I'd see the way the children would react when their dad had to go back in, and the separation of the families, and it all started to the violence that happens there. All of it started to just feel like, why am I here? And in my core, I felt I was destined for something much greater than just to be living a life in this way.
So do you think that's what helped you make the shift? That focus on doing something better?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it got to a point where I kind of felt like there wasn't any lower I could go, and I think I started, instead of saying, and laying down, I kind of just realized, well, it's only up from here, actually, because like I'm way down. Like there's nowhere else for me to go. So I could look at it in this way. And slowly but surely, I started redefining, you know, who I was, who I wanted to be, and terms was a big one for me. So I started to really think about what does respect mean to me? What does, love mean to me? Are those terms that I learned about because the ideas of them have been placed on me, or are they actually my own? And so I went through that journey and started to mold, who I thought I was and what was really important to me, and that's how I started emerging with some changes.
I love those moments in life when you get to kind of completely recreate who you are. And it can happen at any time. I when I went away to college, I decided that the me that I'd been in high school, I didn't like and I didn't want to be anymore. In high school, I was very good at surfing above the groups, but I never really connected with any of them. And my parents went through a divorce, and then my father had a motorcycle accident where he ended up with a severe head injury.
Mhm.
And so I was dealing with all the trauma from that and the trauma of trying to figure out um, the relationship with my mother, and turns out it wasn't there to be built. But I was trying to figure out all those things. And so in high school, I was so bogged down in trying to figure out who I was. And when I went to college, I was like, no, this is who I am. I'm going to be this person going forward. And what I realized is you can do that at any point in time in life. You can always say, okay, today going forward, I'm defining who I am. And it's something we all do every single day, either consciously or unconsciously. On a day-to-day basis, you
Absolutely.
decide who you are in a given day and who you're going to be going forward. The past doesn't really matter. The past is done. Like, you can't change it, you can't rewrite it. Nothing that you do is really going to edit it. And so
Mhm.
when we tie ourselves too much to what happened in the past, then we lose the opportunity to focus on the here and the future and creating whatever it is we want to be. And I love a good opportunity to rewrite the future or refine whatever it is I'm looking for out of life, because it's every time you take that time to do that soul searching that you did, you learn more about yourself and you get closer to whatever it is you truly want out of life.
Absolutely. I mean, that's such a great point, especially at the point where you're saying you could do that at any time, because I think so many people don't realize that they have that gift. Like we have that power as people.
Yes.
The world, we could only see it through our own lens. So, everyone has their own version of that. And what we believe to be true in our world will be,
Yeah.
right? So the fact that you took, that and had that moment of, hey, I could actually build someone else because that's what I believe in my heart that I should be.
Yeah.
And do like it's such a gift that we have to take something that's invisible and make it
Yes.
a real thing.
It's both
So,
a gift and it can be really intimidating sometimes,
oh yeah, it's a scary thing for sure.
there's always this, the times that you're on that edge of some major shift is scary. And I can understand why people choose not to live big lives, because um in my life I have made some pretty amazing leaps, and been like, I'm going to figure out how to fly on the way down. I my follower, this is even really a huge leap, but doing a podcast, I know nothing about podcasting.
Takes so much courage, in my opinion,
It
to do
does. It takes
that.
guts, because I'm like, what am I going to get on and talk with someone about? And what if it goes poorly? And what if people realize that I'm stupid or I'm inarticulate or I've got dumb ideas? Or, it
Yeah.
takes a leap of courage. But everything that you want out of life lies outside of your comfort zone. All of the things that you look at life and you're like, I want to be this, this, and this. All
Mhm.
those things require you to step outside of your comfort zone. And the only thing that's holding you back is you. And once you realize that it's the training wheels you put on yourself that keep you from doing the amazing rides and exploring life, it it brings on a whole new level of opportunity.
Yeah, and I mean exploring those limits
Yes,
and like how you said about sharing some of the things that you've been through, it takes courage to be vulnerable in that aspect. And I think
it does.
for my first few years out, I was very reluctant to tell people about my story because again, that judgment, which, even took to this day, I get it. I mean, when people find out, some people are pretty thrown off by it, and I immediately feel a different energy from them going forward, which is understandable. It's fine. Not everyone is gonna like
It,
me for who I am or for the things that I've done. But what's important to me is that I'm happy with who I am and secure in the choices that I make now, and I'm proud of the choices that I'm making now. And I think that emitting off of me is only gonna bring, the right people around me. So once
yeah,
I did start sharing and seeing the impact on people, on young men, on even on adults. I mean, on Instagram a lot, I talk to normal people my age every day. I talk to their kids if they ask me, and just seeing the small change that I can give to someone, even with a small moment, like you said, the phrase, don't lose the lesson.
yeah.
I'm able to give someone a moment just through a video chat or a DM that they say, look, man, I'm not gonna forget that. And like that really helped me, like push me over the edge to go the right way. I mean, now it's like, you know, let's go, let's keep going. Like, this isn't something I feel like I can stop now.
It's such a gift, it's a gift that goes both ways. Like the more I used to be super closed off about my past and all the struggles I'd been through. And definitely my struggles are different from yours, but like I definitely was used to whenever I'd open up, as I mentioned, you could see people's perception shift. And I had to get comfortable with the fact that the right ones won't care. The right ones, the people that really matter in your life are going to love you and accept you regardless. And the ones that are going to judge would have judged you for something anyway. They already were. You just gave them something new to judge.
It was
But
only a matter of time. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. They were already judging the way that your socks fit or the color of your pants, or like they will find something because their insecurities speak louder than anything that you're putting out.
Yeah.
And it's about them. There's nothing that you can do or will ever do that will shift their need to judge. And that doesn't matter because and that's something that it took me a long time to figure out that what, it's okay if they judge. It doesn't impact me at all. And it's like they say the only way to sink a ship is for the water to get inside.
Hmm.
A ship can stay afloat for decades, but the moment it has a breach in the hull and starts to take water in, unless you figure out a way to patch it up real fast and pump the water out, you're going down. And perceptions of others are no different. The more you give them license to have an impact on your life, because it is, you're giving them the choice, you're giving them the right to have an impact on their life if you choose to care what they think.
Yeah.
Or you can say, you know what, screw it, I'm doing the right thing. I know I'm making the right decisions, and your opinions don't really matter.
And that's a necessary quality you need to
It
go
is.
on to succeed
Yes,
in
it
bigger
is.
things. I mean, something that I'm just thinking of now that I think you might find a little funny is, so when I did do when the crime did happen, the news, like my face was on the news. They started putting me in on the cover of the paper, and like various articles were coming out online. And this happened in 2006. So there wasn't really an active social media thing then. There was social media, but it was very minimal in terms of my age group. And I just remember being on the run, going to that online article and reading the comment section, and just like, oh my gosh, they were tearing me apart. And I remember it really affecting me. Like everyone's gonna hate me, but nobody knows the story.
Yes.
And I can't reply and explain any of this. And now that I'm building, trying to build a personal brand on social media, when I see the comment section sometime, I'm like, wait a minute, I've been here before.
It is
Like, I'm okay
brutal.
now.
It is brutal. And it's tough because I never intended to build a social media following. I started my social media account, I talk about this a lot in the podcasts, but I started my social media account because I had an accident 11 years ago. I was hit by a driver while I was walking on a closed street at a peach festival.
Right.
And I was not paying attention to traffic because there was none. And somehow an elderly lady got on the street and hit me from behind. And I ended up with a head injury. I ended up with a ton of muscle damage, a lot of neurological damage, and it messed with my memories. And so I started my Instagram feed as a way to store my memories, in case something like that ever happened again. It was purely I'm gonna do a daily post as my online memory book. And I honestly never like I can remember when I started, one of my friends, his wife had 1,000 followers. And I was like, that is mind blowing. Like that's 1,000 people that look at her content. That's insane.
Yeah.
And so it was never for me like an intentional move, but it was kind of a trial by fire because the thing that, I'm a full grown woman, I've got kids. But when there is a post going viral and you start to get and there's something about negativity on social media. Anytime
Mhm.
a post goes viral, the flood of negative comments that pour in. And I can't imagine being, you said 18 at the time.
Yeah. I was 21,
I
21.
can't imagine trying to navigate that at 21. Because I mean, I know like me experiencing it now, every single time, it's like the things that people will attack and pull apart. And you're like, you don't know me, you know nothing about me.
It's
Like,
rough there. It
it
is
is
rough there, and you're killing
brutal.
it. You were
It,
killing it.
it is
So I,
brutal. It hurts. It's like, I don't care how strong you are in yourself. I don't care how confident you are. It's going to knock you back.
yeah. I mean, when I saw your page, I was just right away. I was like, man, I thought of like the ultimate respect right away because I'm like, you're dealing with a lot of people. That's like 250,000 people. It's crazy.
And some days I do it with more grace than others. Sometimes
Um,
I'm like, you know what? Forget it. I'm weighing in.
yeah, we're only human,
Sometimes
so
I'm
you might
like,
need to jump in there and call somebody an asshole or something.
and I wish I had more grace with it, because like I see some people who handle the haters and they're like, oh, sending you love and light. And I'm like, I want to be that person 100% of the time. I'm not always.
Me neither. Me neither. I'm with you on that one.
But so I would imagine at 21, that would have been brutal and without the ability to have a voice at all.
Yeah, it did weigh on me and I fell right into that negativity. But I'm thankful, once I got out, my family was very much there for me. I had a good support system and I know there's a lot of stereotypes, when you get out, you're a felon, it's hard to escape the life. And I just feel really blessed because the people that I did run with, there was never really any pressure for us to hang out again. It's
Nice.
almost like when we ran into each other, there was this mutual understanding of, look, I know you're doing what you're doing, just, keep it up. It's love from a distance. I know, those guys know I won't let them in my car if they have like guns on them or something. And, slowly but surely, then I stopped seeing and being around and I moved out of town. I went to college. I got my associates and my bachelor's, moved to New Jersey, and now I live in Philadelphia. I'm part of a great community over here
That's
of
awesome.
good people. So yeah, it's really been a blessing.
And that point of the support network is a big one because I think that we are such a nation of individualists. And the more I travel internationally, the more I'm like, wow, we make it unnecessarily hard on ourselves because we don't tap into community and support as much as we could.
Mhm.
And the more people tap into their community and the people around them, the more it helps to make whatever path you're following easier. Man, and it's a critical piece that I think a lot of people forget about.
Yeah, and I think one thing I used to do, and when I tell my friends this, they always laugh at me for it in a way and crack jokes, but it's the truth. I used to want to get around really good people, and there was a point where I couldn't. It wasn't happening. I wasn't connecting with certain people, and I what I ended up doing, what really helped me was like I kind of created that community in my head of people that I might have looked out up to
Yeah.
uh, in in the world. Like, let's say if I had a particular like UFC fighter that I like to watch, I would think when I went to the gym, if he was running next to me on the treadmill, you know, would he tell me, wouldn't he tell me like, don't get tired today or like keep going or like don't be here for 30 minutes, we're staying for the full hour. And I would kind of like try and pretend I had good people with me. And then eventually, I started running into those people and now I'm part of a good community here in Philadelphia, trying to like reinvest in myself in terms of my health now that I'm getting older. I'm 38. So yeah, I've been running, and that also has been playing to my story and my content and giving me a chance to connect with people as well.
It is, it's interesting. I read something recently that said that we assume I don't know about you. I've seen over and over again. They say that the 5 people that you surround yourself with are how you can identify who you are.
Hmm.
But evidently that's not the case. It's actually out of the 5, the lowest functioning or the lowest producing, sorry, my dog's walking through, the lowest producing one is the one that sets the pace for the other 4. And so you want to make certain that whoever in your circle is the lowest producing one is still producing high enough that they're not dragging you down. I mean, ideally, you want to be the lowest producer in your circle because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
want the other 4 to be pulling you up.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because, like, when I look back and I think about it, it's so true. You can be surrounded by really, really phenomenal people, and all it takes is one that's just completely not firing in your world. And you will spend so much mind share and so much effort and energy trying to help them come up when really all they're doing is dragging you down. They're keeping you from being that better version of yourself.
Yeah, for sure. That phrase of, the tide rises, all ships go with it.
Yes.
Like if you
Yeah.
have someone who starts to not like play their part in the group, uh, which is what's really cool about having a good mindset is it doesn't really matter where it's focused.
Yeah.
So like if you have one friend that like my friends are quite diverse, one of my friends is he has a wife and children and he's all about his family and he's not a hyper focused person on his career, but he's very focused on being a good father, being a good husband, being a good uncle. And like I find so much inspiration from him, even though I might be more focused on career, we support each other through that push of just trying to be better people every day or look for things that we can continue to learn to grow. And but I totally agree. As soon as someone stops participating in the cycle, it's like they start drifting off and eventually that circle becomes a bit smaller.
Yeah. And it's kind of one of the things that I find is that the more I like to think of it as working in the flow. When you are grooving on something and just things, you can just feel the flow and it feels like magic.
Hmm.
I love working on projects where I hit that flow just right because it is such an inspired moment. And it's not that it's easy. Usually I am working harder in those moments, but it's because things are flowing so easily and so effortlessly that I'm inspired and I want to work harder on it because I'm like, you know what? I want to just capitalize on this as much as I possibly can. And when I'm not working in the flow, it's usually because there's someone that's kind of eaten my mind share. And I try to be cognizant of that anymore, where if there's someone who isn't helping me be a better version of myself or supporting that forward trajectory, whatever it is I'm working on, I'm not going to necessarily intentionally cut them out, but I am going to limit the amount of focus that I give them because I don't want to be distracted from this greater purpose that I feel like I'm made for.
Right. There's only so much time and so much energy for you to allocate like that type of value.
Exactly.
And I can relate to that flow state. It's like when you get there, it's really just it makes me feel, look, I belong here. I'm doing the right thing. You feel very like purpose driven.
Yes.
And at the same time, it makes me feel so thankful because I
Yeah.
also think outside of it and think so many people don't even get to feel this feeling like
And it
on their everyday
and it's
life.
amazing. I love, some of the most impressive things I've done, but have also been some of the hardest things I've done have been things where I've tapped into that flow, and it feels like magic.
Mhm.
It just it's like when you make screw ups in the flow, it still helps you get to that next level. And it's so much fun. And I hear you about, like, I feel sorry for people who never get a chance to experience it, because it is so fun and it is so fulfilling, and it is the things that push you to the next level.
Yeah, and it's basic principles too. Like being able to get to those states require the basics of accountability, vulnerability,
Yep.
a strong work ethic.
Yeah.
If people are constantly blaming others or pointing the finger or afraid,
Yes.
they're putting up those walls where they're
Yes.
like the reward is there for them. They're
Yes.
just building a wall in between themselves and that reward on their own, unfortunately. So a lot of people, a big thing that I'm a proponent of is just information. I think that so many people have the tools to do great things, but they just don't have the information. Like as much money as I was making selling drugs, I never had a person tell me, you can open a business. Like as simple as that sounds, I've never had anyone tell me that, or hey, you can get out of this and get an investment property, or you know, things like that. I did not have the scope to understand what that stuff was. I just knew I was making money doing this and maybe I could do this forever in a way.
Well, and I mean, it's hard to be super introspective when money's flowing in hand over fist.
Mhm.
Like I would imagine, I've not been in exactly that situation, but like with my corporate jobs, like I kept getting promoted and promoted and promoted, and I hated it. I hated being in the corporate industry. I hated that that environment, but I
Yeah.
couldn't step away because I was making so much money, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to keep doing it, because the idea of stepping away from that paycheck was crazy to me. But being an entrepreneur, I've had so much more fulfillment and so much more opportunity to tap into the things that really bring me joy, and enable me to take the things that I'm gifted at and really use them. I think everybody's gifted in some way.
Oh
And
yeah, absolutely.
the key is to find what you're gifted in and find a way to use it to improve the world around you. Um, because I think a lot of us get caught up in that trap of paying the bills. And that's an easy trap to get into. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
everybody likes to eat. Everybody likes having a warm bed and having a roof
Yeah.
over the head. Like there's
Right.
no one's like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna focus on my principles. I don't need to eat. But it's easy to get so bogged down in that you forget about the fact that we all have some kind of magical purpose to give the world if we have the guts to tap into it.
Yeah, and I can't imagine what it felt like being you leaving that office, like that first day when you
I
know
felt
it's
stupid.
done. Like, oh my gosh, here we go. Like the leap of faith is extra leap.
I was
It's extra leap.
terrified and I felt stupid. And like, especially, when things did not go gangbusters from the get-go, I was like, that was the stupidest thing I've ever done.
Hmm.
But you also have to realize that there's lots of ways to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And, as you have shown, there are lots of ways to pay the bills.
It's such
And
a different time now.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, there's always multiple ways to skin any issue that you come across. I have a good friend, and he works in the corporate world, but he also does DoorDash. And he said, because you know what, I was sitting around on the sofa every night and watching TV. And he's like, I get a good podcast going, and while doing DoorDash, I can relax while I'm out delivering meals and I'm making money. And I was like, that's brilliant, because that's how he's looking to fund his investments, and he is looking for ways to take whatever additional time he's got and capitalize on it. And I have to give it to him. He's got some serious hustle.
I love stories like that because
Yeah.
when people come up with a plan, some people might who work a corporate job or maybe some other ranked managerial position and think, oh, I could never do something like DoorDash. So
Yeah.
I always love seeing people to say, you know what, I need some capital. I have a plan on what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to use this as a stepping stone. And they're willing to put themselves out there and be vulnerable and hustle. And I think, there's so much to be gained from taking those kind of steps. I mean, as big as the one you take it, but also a smaller one to say, you know what, I'm gonna spend these couple extra hours and work a second job.
Yeah. And I'm going to be hungry, or not literally hungry, but I'm going to be hungry figuratively. Like I'm going to, any means necessary to get to where I want to be. Uh, One of the biggest keys that I found in my corporate success was that I was never too good to do the menial stuff, you know. And I ended up working with a lot of executives on a lot of cool projects because I was the only one that was sitting there at 5:30 and they needed copies run. And I'm like, yes, I absolutely will, because all I need is a little bit of extra face recognition. And when I walk into the room with a group of executives who are sitting there discovering something and I've got a stack of copies, they're going to make that 2-second recognition of who I am. And the next time they see me, they may not make that connection, but they might. And the more that I'm around for things like that, the more they're going to recognize my name, recognize my face. And it was awesome when I used to work for a credit card company, and when they created a .com spinoff, I was really interested, but I didn't know what to do about it. And one of the executives that I had done some just random stuff for, like, random PowerPoint edits and stuff like that, like so quote unquote menial, but I had hooked her up a few times, and so she was like, absolutely, I would love to have you come on my team. And it was great because it was a big enough leap from where I was career wise that I shouldn't have had a shot in hell of getting into her organization, but I had hooked her up a few times, and so she knew that I was someone that could be relied on.
Yeah, you go the extra mile, in the end, you're gonna be miles ahead, like even on
Exactly.
those small decisions. I mean, when I was actually, it's a really funny story how I got into corporate from my job. So I worked for a logistics company called United States Cold Storage, and I was driving a forklift for them for years, just working in their freezers. We store frozen food and pick orders and store and ship products. So I actually had an idea. I had a dream that I had a phone app that would do a lot of our paper processes that the company was currently doing. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I just wrote it on a post-it note,
I
like,
love
man,
that.
that would be a good idea. And I wasn't a technical guy. I didn't, I was in school at the time, in community college, pursuing my associates in just general studies. And when I woke up the next morning, I thought, man, this could really be a good idea. Like, this has to save time and money. So I Googled, how do I make an app if I don't know how to code? Because I didn't know anything. And I end up finding a service where I can pay some money and just build a mock version. And so I did that, and I created a presentation, a PowerPoint, and I asked my general manager and I said, look, I have an idea. Can I come in on my day off? All I need is 5 minutes. And he let me come in and do a presentation. I went, got a suit for it, and treated it as professional as I could. He loved the idea, but he said, I'm not a technical guy. Do you mind if I take a couple pictures and I'll send an email to corporate? So he did so, and by the time I went home, I had already had an email from our vice president that said, hey, I heard you have an idea. We welcome great ideas here. Can you be up here this Friday to give the presentation?
That's
And
awesome.
so I went there and did the same thing, and the app didn't get absorbed because we didn't have budget or resources, but it got me in the door
Yeah,
as a tester. And then over the past 4 or 5 years now, I'm 10 years with the company now, and now I'm managing that same system that I used to look at on the forklift.
that is
So
awesome. That
yeah,
that
it's
is
such a blessing.
story. Well, it's a blessing, but you made it happen. You know, you something interesting that you talked about was the fact that the idea came to you in the middle of the night. A lot of the great classical authors, Hemingway, Bronte, they all had these books that they would keep by their bedside. And anytime, oh, what's the Tolstoy? Tolstoy was huge on this book. And anytime they had an idea pop up in the middle of the night, they would roll over, they would write it down, and go back to sleep. Because your subconscious is cranking while you sleep. It's one of those incredibly fertile times. And so that's huge that you not only had the idea, but you took action on it. And that kind of initiative is what shows people what you're made of and what you're capable of. So that's huge.
Yeah, it was an awesome confidence builder for me because just like you had said, I never imagined, we looked at people up at corporate like those are the guys in the suits, we're the boots on the ground.
Yeah.
They don't understand our lives, we don't understand theirs. But I knew once I got in there, given my past and everything that I've been through, I started to tell myself, I know I can work so much harder than people imagine because they have no idea what I've just been through. And, when I see some really hard software problem or some chaos that might be happening in some production code, it's hard for me to classify that as like a big problem versus the times that people have tried to kill me over some street beef. And they always ask me, how are you so calm? And
Really?
whenever things get chaotic, and I'm like, well,
That's so true though. I know exactly what you mean. It's like I used to make the joke, it's not gonna eat me. And like it's end of the day, like, yeah, it may blow up and explode. Oh well, you know? Yeah, I love that. That's awesome.
yeah, it's those are some of the tools that I still reach back to use, don't reach back to the past, but I reach back to the lesson.
That's huge though. That is huge, is that you learn from it and then you move forward. And
Hmm.
that you keep that in your pocket as a tool to go back to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rock on them really quickly. Let's see. So I know we are hitting the end of our hour, and this has been amazing.
Yeah,
And
it's so nice. Thank you again for this.
thank you for this. This was hilarious, and I love it. You have some really phenomenal learning experiences that you took. Like what could have been an end stop. I mean, there's a lot of people that hit something like that, and they take it as an end stop, and they're like, you know what, this is who I am. And so,
Yeah,
you know, it's gonna sound cheesy, but like kudos to you for being like, no, I've got a vision and I can't tell you exactly how I'm gonna get there, but I am going to be something bigger. And
thank you. Yeah.
that's amazing.
I'm trying to convince other people otherwise as well. If the people that believe like their story's over, I'm trying to show them, look, there's so much more left, you
Yeah.
know, so much more durable than you think you are. You just need, the right information and the right guidance.
Well, and sharing your story, you will reach more people than you ever realize. And it is such a gift to show people that it isn't an end stop, that we all hit road bumps and it's not a, well, okay, my life is done, let's write it off. Because
Mhm.
it's easy when you're in the middle of it and you're down deep in it, it's easy to give up and be
Oh,
like,
yeah,
that's it. There's nowhere to go from here. But it takes it takes grit, but it also takes like so much perseverance and persistence to say, you know what? Nope, this is just part of my story. And we're going up from
absolutely.
here.
It's a great point. Yeah.
So where can they find you, Josh, if they want to know more about you?
Everything I have is on Instagram. People can follow me at November. It's KNOW_VEMBER.
Rock on. And I'll put a link when we get this post up. I'll put it with link to the episode. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate this. Like I know you worked a full day today and then came and it's nighttime and you made time for this. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
And
thank you for making time for me. This was an awesome conversation. I really had a great time.
I did too. And I'm excited. I'm sure that you'll make a lot of change, with this episode, but like just in general, you are a change maker. And
I
so
appreciate that. So are you. So I'm looking forward to seeing you keep impacting people the way you are as well.
thank you. I appreciate it. Have an awesome night. I can't thank you enough for this. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.